All right, my friends, I'm going to read you some excerpts from one of the most, just one of the most profound books I've ever read. It's John Waters' Beyond Consolation. I don't know if you can see that. John Waters' Beyond Consolation. I'm reading this one right now. Port City Crossfire. Pretty good, actually. Main writer. Anyway, John Waters' Beyond Consolation. I'm just going to read you some excerpts. This might not be your thing. That's fine. I just, for me, it's one of the most, C.S. Lewis, Screw Tape Letters. There's a number of books that are, I'll draw a blank up the other ones, but this one is in the top 10 without question. And we're just going to read them to you. So this is from page 32. The fundamental error of this increasingly secular / agnostic age is that religion is something imposed, that it comes from the outside and molds, oppresses, and brainwashes. But my religious belief is my very being, my relationship with the entire order of reality. I am connected to everything that ever was and ever will be. I'm alive in infinite time and space, which eventually converges in what cosmology calls space-time. This incomprehensible reality is what keeps me alive, keeps me connected, keeps me charged with the human appetites for hope, beauty, truth, justice, happiness, love, good for what is called God. This condition pre-exists me. I cannot shake it off. I can deny it, but that won't change my fundamental structure and nature, which is dependent, which is created, which is charged with a unique destiny, and which is fundamentally mysterious, perhaps most of all to myself. Man, this is freaking great. Here, good boy. Good boy. Here's the next page. This is from chapter 3, Winking at the Milky Way. It was as if, even now, she was more concerned with seeming to be consistent in the eyes of the culture than in looking at what she herself might have been feeling deeper down. This is a writer from Ireland who died, relatively young age, I think late 50s, early 60s, with cancer, and she just could not come to thinking about a larger purpose other than being extinguished. And she was heartbroken. But when asked about it, because she had given her whole life to atheism, and when asked about it, she just could not, it was just, she was more concerned with seeming to be consistent in the eyes of the culture than in looking at what she herself might have been feeling deeper down. It's horrific, and it's just pride. It's sad, man. But she could not do it. She goes, I've always been this way. I can't shake that. Sad. The main objective of most public square discussions about God and religion is either to denounce the influence of religion as an impediment to freedom, or, in response to this impulse, to reinforce existing beliefs as a protection against such heretical endeavors. This constant argument is presented as a struggle between reason and irrationality, whereas those who question the claims of religion are extended the courtesy of being deemed to operate from the solid ground of reason. Those on the other side are at best patronizingly congratulated for the tenacity which they hold on to irrational beliefs. Believers are not regarded as approaching their beliefs through discipline of thought. The word faith is used on both sides of the argument to put an end to the idea that such concepts can be approached by means of human reason. I mean, think about that. Man. Those who question the claim of religion are extended the courtesy of being deemed to operate from the solid ground of reason, whereas those on the other side are at best patronizingly congratulated for their tenacity to hold on to irrational beliefs. The idea of God is not permitted as a response to the unimaginable mystery. It has become too bogged down in ideas of superstition and tribalism and platitude and hypocrisy and manipulation and abuse. Our societies are prepared to concede in public that belief in a deity is something some people hold to, but there is an unspoken understanding that while there is an obligation on the liberal mindset to be tolerant of such simple-mindedness, this holding to God is an outmoded and rather reactionary outlook on the reality of life. The next chapter, chapter 4. There is in our culture now a strange sense that the structural limitation of mankind as depending on something mysterious has been overcome. I've screwed that up. There is, in our culture now, a strange sense that the structural limitation of mankind as dependent on something mysterious has been overcome. That's the silent melody chapter. Chapter 5, human beings are human beings. The more slavishly and dogmatically a person falls for a ready-made ideological system or worldview, the more certainly he will bury all chances of thinking, of freedom, of being clear about what he knows. The more certainly he will deaden the adventure of the mind, and the more certainly in practice he will begin to serve the order of death. Man. Buddy, come here. Hold on just a second. Oh, here we go. Mainstream media in our mass media society generally offer a clear ideological view of reality, the fundamental essence of which can be defined as an ideology of progress. Everything, or almost everything, is presented according to an underlying idea to do with man's omnipotence. Everything, or almost everything, suggests that human needs will eventually be met entirely by progress, that we are being driven forward by a project of self-improvement that will one day will answer all of our questions. It is possible to dissent from this ideology and still be included in this discussion, but if you volunteer for such participation, you will, after a while, begin to realize that the function of such contributions is not to offer an alternative vision of reality, but rather to provide a grazing pseudo-democratic aspect to the dominant message. You can go against the cultural grain, but unless you are particularly obtuse, you must recognize that what comes across from such contributions is simply that the outlet in question is sufficiently tolerant to allow for the publication of clearly wrong-headed views. In this case, views that question the very central essence of progress and its commitment to confer on humankind all that is humanly desirable. Clearly, any such views are not merely wrong, but dangerously so. There is nothing intrinsically rational about the idea that weather is the result of natural causes. Very few people understand much about these natural processes, but simply accept the assumption they have been assured they are correct. They therefore trust the weather forecast in much the same way as the ancient tribe trusted the rain dance. They take for granted that the communal knowledge of the culture is reliable. How can someone who accepts one set of assumptions reserve the right to sneer at someone else who has used essentially the same mechanism to arrive at a different perspective? And I found this to be incredible. They therefore trust, in modern era, the weather forecasts in much the same way as the ancient tribe trusted the rain dance. They take for granted that the communal knowledge of the culture is reliable. But how can someone who simply accepts one set of assumptions reserve the right to sneer at someone else who has used essentially the same mechanism to arrive at a different perspective? The Sabotage of Hope, Chapter 6. In this culture, faith is doomed to the function of consolation for those who come to realize they cannot measure up to the ideal or anything like it. And something in the demeanor of the religious sensibility confirms that this is true. An embrace opens up which itself betrays the characteristics of disappointment, of resignation, of terror, of a kind of failure. Christ is offered as a consolation prize for those who cannot meet the standards of culture. In other words, religious culture, in spite of itself, acquiesces into the marginalization of religion. Sneering at religion is simply lazy thinking, seeking to avail of a culture created by previous lazy thinking to claim for itself an intelligence it does not deserve. Oh, man. Sneering at religion is simply lazy thinking, seeking to avail of a culture created by previous lazy thinking to claim for itself an intelligence it does not deserve. Though this superficialistness lays claim to a basis and reason, there is nothing reasonable about it. It is merely the reflex action of the unthinking, huddled together in fear that admissions of human vulnerability will cause them to be laughed at. There is something seriously wrong with our culture when it allows someone to lay claim to a heightened rationality for an interpretation of reality based on nothing but skepticism, pessimism, cynicism, and despair. Most certainly, let's see, what was this? All right, not sure I got that. Most certainly, I told him I didn't think this would work for Irish society, that it might be conceivably. Okay, I'm not sure where I got there. Chapter 8, The Keyhole of Reason. Our culture teaches that unless I can demonstrate something, it cannot be true. This is a reduction of reason comparable to trying to examine reality through a keyhole. I see vague moving shapes, but most of my capacities are neutralized. If I confine my sense of reality to what is demonstrable, I would not be able to get out of bed in the morning without first checking that the floor beds are still there. I tell you, this is one apologists talk about this all the time. But the need to, you have faith, even if you're not a Christian or a religious believer, you have faith that things work, even if you don't examine them in advance. You just trust that they will. And this is what he's saying here. I can still have no reasonable expectation that the kettle will boil, that the car will start when I turn the key. If we demand that everything be demonstrated before we begin, then nothing is possible because we know almost nothing. The idea of pure reason, in the sense of a mechanical process of logic moving systematically through the facts, and tying everything together, is confined to mathematics and related principles, related disciplines. Let me read that again. The idea of pure reason, in the sense of a mathematical process, the idea of pure reason, in the sense of a mechanical process of logic moving systematically through the facts and tying everything together, is confined to mathematics and related disciplines. I.e., you can't get pure reason in philosophical arguments. You can't. In the popular mind, science tends to exist in bundled up or precast knowledge routinely assumed to be correct. It is not that the individual in question knows or understands, simply that for reasons of cultural compliance, he chooses to accept. It's not that we know or understand, it's that we choose to accept. Science is the best understanding of things that mankind has arrived at up to the present moment. Logic is the process of working from what we know to what we can surmise about what is, in some sense, unknowable. Logic, therefore, requires a process of speculation or surmise in an attempt to establish something that is unclear or uncertain. In logic, there is, dare I say it, a leap of faith, which seeks to test something that is as of yet only guessed at, and therefore unproven. By definition, therefore, the use of logic requires a departure from what, in political society, we consider the scientific mindset, because you have to take a leap of faith, something you can only guess at. Far from modern science being in conflict with the religious interpretations of reality, it is itself a creature of Christian belief that the God-given powers of human reason were capable of divining the God-created workings of the world. I 100%. Christianity and science are not at loggerheads. Science and Christianity go hand in hand. Mankind has an inbuilt negativity born of the need to detect danger in the environment, and unless this bias is sufficiently modified in culture, this makes us lean towards the more negative interpretations of reality. Conflating the essential issues of existence with the concept of organized religion, some people lazily reject both at the same time. Conflating the essential issues of existence with the concept of organized religion, some people lazily reject both. One of the remarkable things about our current skepticism is that it cannot see itself. It is hermetically sealed against the consciousness of its own despondency and bleakness. Proffering unbelief as evidence of our realism or enlightenment, we casually think of it, if think is the right word at all, as the objective and naturalistic observation of reality. When the perspective of this pessimism is advanced in our culture, it is never advanced as a simple opinion. Implicity is more than that. A rational statement about observable reality, when it's not true. These claims to ownership of reason are plausible only because religious people have come at some deep level to believe that such claims are legitimate. But when reason is extended to reintegrate heart and the spirit, and if the right words are found to give voice to authentic claims of true and total reason, the spurious reasoning of the cynics and disbelievers become exposed for what it is. Despair dressed as enlightenment. Oh, my goodness. Despair dressed as enlightenment. Oops. All right, hold on just a second. I got to go back to where I was. All right, hold on just a second. All right. Hold on just a second. We'll go through a lot here. All right, so we'll just keep going here. For beauty is not a matter of aesthetic appreciation of shapes and colors, but the reawakening to the original beauty from whence we came. The gulag of unhope. For reasons suggesting a degree of historical mitigation too distant in time to be of any relevance, Irish Catholicism jettisoned Christ, was overcome by a love for power, and so unleashed a warped and corrupted culture of religiosity in Irish society. In a sense, the church made children of us all, destroying any true sense of God in Christ and nurturing only fear and guilt. This mutant version of Catholicism usurped the church's teaching on human sexuality and then deployed it as an instrument of control and subjugation. Vacating this teaching of any sense that is a body of a knowledge of one man's structure, finally reducing Christianity to one puerile idea that sex is bad. Oh, man. Either God exists or he does not. If yes, then nothing that happens can be taken literally, or as definitive, or as irrevocable, or can legitimately lead to despair, or be devoid of hope, or be thought incapable of instantaneous change. If there is no God, then yes, there is no hope, except what mankind can conjure out of the illusion of the temporality that is earthly existence. Our societies are being reconstructed to obscure from sight any possibility of a consciousness of an infinite, eternal, or absolute dimension. The idea of mystery is being abolished in the construction of a new ceiling calculated to create the illusion that human beings can function within a self-defined, even self-created space. Oh, man. The problem lay not with the system, but with the fact that human longing, being infinite, remained incapable of earthly satisfaction. Why, for a start, does he believe that nothing awaits him beyond this life? Does he have evidence of this? Is this belief grounded in his experience? If so, on what? Does he believe in anything he has not been able to prove? Art has always been one purpose, to kneel us before the mystery of our existence. The essence of the mystery is within each of us, and the artist's task is to find a way of expressing it that it will not short circuit into conventional wisdom. Oh, man. Seamus Heaney was availing of a mechanism in the culture which, having already established absolute wisdom on these matters, requires only that the speaker nod in the direction of the prevailing assumptions in order to avail of the culture's consensual and intellectual protection. Man, you don't have to. It only requires you nod when Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris or one of these other guys talks, and that will give you, you'll be availed of the cultural's consensual and intellectual protection. Saying you're an atheist, yes, I agree with Richard Dawkins, I agree with Sam Harris, and you have all the protections that are afforded atheists now. Oh, man. All right, let's keep going. This is fantastic. In 2007, in the second encyclical of his papacy, Pope Benedict XVI talked about hope in this way. Day by day, man experiences greater or lesser hopes, different in kind according to the different periods of his life. Sometimes one of these hopes may appear to be totally satisfying without any need for other hopes. Young people can have the hope of a great and fully satisfying love, the hope of a certain position in their profession, or of some success that will prove decisive for the rest of their lives. When those hopes are fulfilled, however, it becomes clear that they were not, in reality, the whole. It becomes evident that the man has need of a hope that goes further. It becomes clear that only something infinite will suffice for him, something that will always be more than he can ever attain. In this regard, our contemporary age has developed the hope of creating a perfect world that, thanks to scientific knowledge and to scientifically based politics, seems to be achievable. In the course of time, however, it has become apparent that this may be a hope for a future generation, but not for me. At a certain moment in your life, you rumble this idea and, drawing in the totality of your experience, begin to comprehend that if you continue to see things in the same old way, what will happen in the future is pretty much, in essence, what happened in the past. And this will no longer contain the illusory promise that is held before. The specifics of your experience may change, but the outcome, measured in happiness and satisfaction, will be reduced. At the heart of a cultural obsession with youth is a fear of death. It is itself a symptom of a loss of faith. Because our generations lack a convinced belief in hereafter, all our hopes hinge on the realization of our appetites in the only existence we know about. The idea that our lives might pass and leave us still full of longing is one that terrifies us as to where we seem to remember our souls used to be. There's just a couple more here. For reasons that, this is courtesy towards Christ, chapter 15. For reasons that remain unclear, modern societies have jumped to the conclusion that advancing human knowledge because it seems to undermine certain past formulations of the human attempt at self-description is ipso facto opposed to the religious way of seeing things. Some religious people, reacting to this simplification, have developed a suspicion of science. But science itself is neutral, being no more than the pursuit of a natural curiosity about reality. I have the feeling that something more than intellectual subterfuge is preventing me from admitting my belief in a personal God, he wrote to his wife. This is Václav Havel. Something deeper is concealed behind these subterfuges. When he was in prison, he's writing to his wife from prison because of communists in Poland, and he's writing these things. What I'm lacking is that extremely important last drop in the form of a mystical experience, an enigmatic address and revelation. Man. So he has a feeling that something more than intellectualistic subterfuge is preventing me from admitting my belief in a personal God. Something deeper is concealed behind these subterfuges, and I'm lacking is that important last drop in the form of a mystical experience. A couple years ago, talking to a Puerto Rican Monsignor with an acute gift for simplicity, I found myself embarrassingly asking if he could explain to me the core meaning of Christianity. He urged me not to feel bad, since 95% of Christians do not understand Christianity either. He said that keep doing this, man. He said that, hold on just a second. You have to pause it real quick. He said that a short time before, while lecturing in a Catholic seminary in the U.S., he had been approached by a young man about to be ordained who asked him a related but more specific question. He wanted to know the meaning of the resurrection. The Monsignor took him to a graveyard and picked a grave at random. The headstone indicated that a man, let's call him Daniel, was buried there. What the Monsignor asked the young seminarian, do we know of Daniel? The young man shrugged. We know, said the Monsignor, that Daniel is dead, that his body is inert, his mind is void, and that even if we were to bring 20 dancing girls and have them cavort around his grave, Daniel would continue to display a radical disinterest in reality. On the evening of that first Good Friday, he went on. This is Monsignor. This is how it was with Jesus. But then 40 hours later, something happened that would change everything. Jesus came back to life. Let us be clear, he emphasized, this is the Monsignor. Jesus began to breathe again. He grew warm. He started to move. He re-engaged with reality, became interested in things around him. Having been dead as Daniel, who had shown before a display of radical disinterest in reality because Daniel was dead, he became Jesus once again as alive as we are right now, you and I. This too is history. This, the Monsignor said, is both the meaning of the resurrection and the central idea of Christianity, that death has no dominion, that beyond the end there is a new beginning. Christianity, he said, is the announcement to the world of the death of death. If you put me on the spot to explain the core of Christian belief, I would have mumbled something about Jesus dying for our sins. Why? Not sure. I would mumble and possibly flinch in anticipation of a clout on the ear for the outrage of being ignorant about the reasons Christ died for me. He had died for me, and I could not even trouble myself to understand why. This was my sense of Easter. Being responsible for the death of Jesus, I was relieved that he had managed to get out of the pickle I got him into. Here's a big one right here, man. In its constant reiteration of rules, the Catholic Church in Ireland has seemed to forget that there is a need to tell people why, rather than out of blind obedience and some weird desire to be told how to live their lives, they might want to listen to its message. Very often, those who are voices of the church fail to emphasize the most important part, that once in history, 2,000 years ago, God came to earth as a man to demonstrate that the death is a myth born of the limited human imagination. On the threshold of adulthood, seduced by the freedoms of the world, I turned my back onto this Jesus. This turning away was accompanied by a considerable emotion on my part, mostly anger at the abuses I perceived in the administration of Christianity in my own culture. Though there were other emotions as well, relief, guilt, excitement, trembling, it strikes me now that I never once attached any of the anger I felt to the person of Jesus, never once had a negative thought about him, never once felt I should blame him for anything. Despite everything, the icon that is Christ remains intact in our culture, venerated by some, but quietly respected even those who deny belief in or adherence to the Christian proposal. This is a strange and interesting. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. There's just so much. I just, right here, the last one. I cannot reason my way to certainty or heaven, or the certainty of heaven. I cannot reason myself into the arms of Christ. There's so much in here, man, and I could go on and on and on. Lastly, I am turned off by a strain in almost all organized religions, and strikingly in the more traditional strains of Irish Catholicism, which seem to glory in the vindication of seeing people brought to their knees. I have no sense of being a prodigal son home to be feasted. I shudder a little when someone congratulates me for returning to the faith. I have returned no place except closer to an understanding of myself. And then he talks about the Pope Benedict. Many consider the church to be an outdated and fossilized system which has constantly been more isolated and inflexible, creating around itself a defensive shell which is crushing its own life. Such is the impression of a large number. Not many manage to perceive that, on the contrary, it holds something surprisingly new for them, something daring and generous which entails a rupture with the routine habits of life. However, it is precisely those who have had to endure the full brunt of modernity who discover this. I did not realize how insanely profound Pope Benedict was. It's precisely those who have had to endure the full brunt of modernity who discover this. The church offers something new, exciting, contrary, dangerous, or daring. Look, doesn't have to be Catholic Church. I don't care. I sit there. Who have understood the full brunt of modernity are the people who discover the daring nature of the church, which is a rupture of the routine habits of day-to-day life. It's surprisingly new, says the Pope. This is the old Pope. That is so true, man. It's I was just listening to my man Finn McKenty from Punk Rock NBA. I'm going to interview tomorrow, and he was talking about a lot of Christian metal bands from the 2000s. I remember a lot of those guys, and I just remember they're big, and then they're not big anymore. And Finn was saying, I actually think this is true, that a lot of them just left the faith. And I think that's true because a lot of them were raised probably in the faith, and they hadn't had their own experiences outside of it. And when they got older, maybe going to college or whatever, going to work, they left the faith because that's all they knew, and they found this new exciting thing outside the faith. And what the Pope Benedict was saying is, a lot of these people are going to come back presumably because once they get the full brunt of modernity, they'll recognize, this wasn't all it's cracked up to be. And they'll go back to the church, as I have, and say, the church is where the excitement is. The church is where it's daring. The church is the break we need to the full brunt of modernity, essentially the day-to-day shackles that we all find ourselves in. And, I don't know if these people, I don't know. I just know, you'll take one convert over 10 people raised to believe in one thing because a convert has a new blood. You see what I'm saying? And anyway, it's that. And here's John Waters, who left the faith, became an atheist, and now he's back because he dealt with the full brunt of modernity. alcohol. I think he did drugs. I'm not sure. A split marriage. And he says, this isn't freedom. This isn't liberation. Now, that doesn't mean the orthodox are the rules, but it does mean there's something liberating in knowing that this is irrelevant what happens here, because the future and the beauty of eternity awaits for those who seek it. God doesn't force you to seek it, man. God doesn't force you to seek it. All right, get the book. It's fundamentally, it's awesome. I would not get it as an Audible, or at least for me, because I gotta put it down and think about it, and I can't do that while I'm driving or walking the dog or something like that. I just gotta sit there and put it down and think. All right, we'll see you.